And what if your job ceased to exist tomorrow, but your livelihood was guaranteed forever? As artificial intelligence and robotics keep advancing, scientists and Silicon Valley billionaires agree on one thing: human labor, as we know it, has its days numbered. In today's episode, we're going to understand how technology is about to force the biggest economic revolution in human history. Because while billionaires are discussing paying people just for existing, autonomous drones are quietly starting to replace workers inside warehouses. Humanoid robots are learning real agricultural tasks. Companies are creating entire fleets of these robots connected through artificial intelligence. And all of this is accelerating as the days go by. Want proof? The United States has just released its most advanced chips. Do you know for whom? For China. Let's break all this down. Hello everyone, I'm Realidade Impressionante and you're watching Realidade Impressionante. There's a kind of silent question that is growing behind the explosion of artificial intelligence. And it might be much deeper than, are machines going to replace human jobs? The real question has to be this: what happens to an entire civilization when work is no longer necessary for its survival? Because throughout almost all of human history, employment and personal value have gone hand in hand. Work wasn't just a way to earn money. It was how society distributed dignity, purpose, and even access to life itself. But now this logic is slowly starting to come into conflict with technology. As generative AI systems, humanoid robots, and autonomous systems are advancing, some of the biggest figures in Silicon Valley have started to advocate for an idea that just a few years ago seemed too radical, even for academic debates: universal basic income. And maybe the most curious thing, or maybe not, right, is to notice who is actually saying this. People like Sandy Altman and Elon Musk don't talk about basic income as a social charity. They talk about it almost as a mathematical necessity of capitalism itself in the face of this emerging automation. Okay, and let me make it clear, we're not talking about a socialist utopia, but rather that a paradox is starting to appear. They know that if machines produce wealth more and more efficiently while at the same time eliminating so many jobs, capitalism will simply collapse if people don't have money to spend. And it was precisely in trying to understand and prove this that Sandy Altman, for example, funded one of the largest basic income experiments ever conducted through open research. For 3 years, thousands of people received about $1,000 a month, and this without any specific requirements. No obligation to work, no goals, and no conditions. They simply received this money so they could live. And the results drew a lot of attention for a very simple reason. People didn't stop living their normal lives. A large part of the money was directed towards health, education, emotional stability, and even starting small businesses. Instead of simply abandoning any activity or the paid jobs they already had, many participants simply started making less desperate decisions about their own lives. And this reveals something very important about human behavior. Because a large part of modern work doesn't exist just to generate economic value. Many times it exists because people, we human beings, need to survive financially within a system based on the artificial scarcity of income. If artificial intelligence starts to break this logic, then the inevitable question arises: where will this money come from so that billions of people can survive? Some billionaires and financial experts suggest that if a robot replaces a human worker, the company should pay the equivalent in taxes to help fund universal basic income. Some business people and economists have started to support completely new models of wealth distribution. Bill Gates, for example, has already suggested the same thing, that companies should pay a tax on the robot that replaces human labor. And this would be exactly what's needed to cover this basic income. The CEO of OpenAI, Stan Heltman, takes a different approach. He proposes sovereign wealth funds linked to artificial intelligence companies, allowing part of the value generated by automation to be distributed directly to the population. Their idea is simple, revolutionary, and controversial at the same time. And in some cases, of course, if AI systems are capable of generating practically unlimited wealth, maybe we humans will no longer have to rely exclusively on our own work to access basic resources. And it's exactly at this point that the discussion stops being economic and starts to become existential. If machines do everything, what's left for us humans? It's a fact that the end of mandatory work opens up space for what philosophers call the post-work era. Without this excessive pressure for survival, humanity could focus on art, science, space exploration, philanthropy, things like that. The economy will no longer be based on physical production, and it will become focused on creativity and well-being. According to them, universal basic income is not a way to support the unemployed, as it is today. It's the key to freeing human potential from the slavery of repetitive work. That's what those who support this idea say. And yes, maybe humanity will enter for the first time an era where survival and employment are no longer synonymous. For better or for worse, I can't tell you. I admit I still don't have a clear opinion on this. I can already give my opinion on one thing and assure you, this future brings some serious risks, Extreme inequality, absurd concentration of technological power, and total economic dependence on these big corporations. These are the real possibilities that I'm sure are going to happen. And now tell me, in the best case scenario, okay? What would you do with your life if money was no longer a concern? Would you stay at your current job just as a hobby? Or would you look for a new passion, something new to do? While you open the comments section here and help me out, I know you're going to do that. I'm going to bring up another piece of information. Information that connects exactly with what we just saw, okay? Leave a comment and stay focused. It's getting interesting. And what if the price for you to receive a salary without working is the total surrender of your mind? Because for centuries, capitalism revolved around human physical strength. Then computers came along and the focus shifted to intellectual productivity. But now, my friends, as artificial intelligence and robotics begin to take over both manual labor and some cognitive work, a new competition seems to be emerging. And this competition is for the human mind. In a scenario where machines produce practically everything, economic value is no longer just in physical products. It starts to migrate to something much more abstract. Perception, digital presence, behavior, and biometric data. Yes, my friends, it's a fact. Money as we know it is changing. We are now entering the era of the attention economy at its extreme. A system where your brain stops being just your work tool and becomes the most valuable currency on the planet. When everything becomes abundant and free because of artificial intelligence, the focus of capitalism shifts. The product is no longer the car or the software, for example. Now the product is you. And maybe the most curious thing of all is realizing that this has already started. One well-known experiment is the WorldCoin project by Sam Neltman. The official proposal from these guys seems relatively simple: to create a digital identity capable of proving that you are a human being. And this happens because the internet is increasingly flooded by artificial intelligences. For this, people from all over the world scan their own irises using metallic devices called orbs. And this happened in exchange for access to the system and the distribution of cryptocurrencies. Over 17 million people, including 500,000 Brazilians, have already given their eye biometrics. Recent partnerships with platforms like Tinder, for example, have shown that proof of humanity is becoming the key to accessing digital society. Without your validated biological code, you simply cease to exist for the economic system. And there's a powerful logic behind all of this. In a future dominated by generative artificial intelligence, distinguishing real humans from artificial agents may become economically essential. Social networks, banks, dating apps, and digital platforms, all of these have already started relying on biometric verification to ensure there's a real person on the other side of the screen. But maybe this is just the first layer of the transformation. Because the moment biological identity becomes an economic infrastructure, your bodily data starts to have direct financial value. And this is where the so-called attention economy starts to evolve into something even deeper. Today, companies like Apple and Meta have already developed devices capable of tracking eye movements with millimeter precision. Spatial computing glasses, for example, can understand exactly where you're looking, how long you spend observing something, and which stimuli captured much more of your attention. And of course, this reveals extremely intimate information. Neuroscientists have already shown that gaze patterns can indeed anticipate interests, emotional impulses, and subconscious decisions even before the person consciously realizes what they truly want. In other words, your attention stops being just behavior and becomes raw economic data. And some platforms have already started experimenting with models where users are actually compensated for the authenticity of their own digital presence. Instead of selling only physical products, Companies are now starting to monetize real human engagement in environments infested with bots and synthetic content. In practice, you'll be working for the algorithm just by looking at a screen. Your attention is the new digital goldmine. And maybe that's where the most uncomfortable paradox of this future arises. This scenario creates a grim paradox. To ensure that citizens keep generating data to maintain the basic income, AIs will be programmed to trap your mind in endless dopamine loops. This is already happening. We see this infinite feed, this endless scrolling, unfortunately. If you disconnect, your flow of quantum dividends or digital coins will decrease until you have nothing left. Total freedom from physical labor can result in maximum psychological slavery, where humanity lives numbed by synthetic entertainment generated by algorithms that feed on our biological reactions. Not necessarily because of conscious malice or unconscious malice from the machines, but because keeping humans connected becomes economically advantageous. So, the same technology that promises to free people from repetitive work can end up creating another form of imprisonment. A constant psychological dependence on digital environments designed precisely to capture as much human perception as possible. From now on, my friends, we're going to see in practice how all of this is already happening. Let's go! And while the world debates whether artificial intelligence and robots will really replace all jobs, researchers and companies are already making it happen. MIT, for example, has developed a technology that is still in its early stages, but is already beginning to eliminate a specific type of human work, the so-called invisible jobs. Those operational jobs that keep supply chains running, but rarely come up in discussions about the future of the economy. One of the companies emerging from this environment is Curves Robotics. The startup created a drone called Curves One. It was designed to perform automated inventory inside warehouses, using artificial intelligence and advanced computer vision. In my opinion, the most impressive part is that it operates almost entirely by itself. The system uses multiple cameras and deep neural networks to navigate through narrow aisles, avoid obstacles, and scan goods without relying on GPS, sensors spread throughout the environment, or human operators constantly supervising. In practice, the drone learns the space as if it were an animal learning a new territory. And this significantly changes the economic model of automation. For years, the cost was so high that many companies simply kept relying on human workers. According to the developers, a gigantic warehouse can be completely mapped by the system in just a few days using only computer vision based on EIA. The drone navigates even in dark environments and updates the inventory systems in real time. All of this happens while it moves between the shelves. And maybe it's right here that the story starts to get a little uncomfortable. More than what we've seen so far, I think. Because tasks that used to require entire teams of human employees walking through aisles, riding industrial elevators, and manually checking each barcode are now starting to be replaced by machines operating continuously, 24 hours a day on their own. No breaks, no fatigue, and no skipping. And this happens in a way that almost doesn't attract public attention. Traditional industrial automation was visible. Huge robotic arms inside factories, automated conveyor belts, machines replacing workers on assembly lines. All of this happened right before our eyes. But now, artificial intelligence is also starting to reach the invisible layers of global logistics. And the goal goes far beyond just scanning shelves. Corvus Robotics' vision involves tracking goods from the moment they leave the trucks to their final distribution, connecting drones, robots, and autonomous systems in a logistics chain that's practically independent of human presence. This means automated factories producing goods, autonomous vehicles transporting the products, robotic arms unloading the cargo, and drones continuously organizing the inventory. A complete economic infrastructure operating almost without direct human intervention. But drones are just the beginning of all this. Because now companies are also starting to replace human workers with entire fleets of humanoid robots connected by artificial intelligence. Let's take a look now. The British company Humanoid has just closed a huge deal with the German supplier Scaffer. The idea is to deploy thousands of wheeled humanoid robots in industrial facilities around the world. The plan calls for a gradual but large-scale deployment by 2032, starting as early as 2026 in real factories in Germany. At Skepler's facility, robots will move boxes in active industrial environments while another company unit handles operational testing and full-scale validation. And the most important detail lies in how these robots will be used. Humanoid isn't just selling the machines, they're offering something much more like a continuous automation infrastructure. The model works as a subscription service where the company provides the robots, maintenance, software updates, ongoing technical support, and complete fleet management. In practice, the robots start to be treated as part of the company's operational infrastructure, almost like computing services or industrial cloud systems. And there's another even more interesting layer to all of this: the collective intelligence of these machines. The robots operate using an architecture called Connect IQ. This is an artificial intelligence system created to coordinate large fleets of humanoid robots simultaneously. Instead of each robot acting in isolation, the platform works almost like a distributed intelligence, capable of dividing tasks, reorganizing priorities, and adapting operations in real time. There's a system responsible for the overall coordination of the fleet, and another that translates the objectives into specific subtasks. In addition to vision and language models for physical manipulation, and even a layer dedicated to fine control of the robot's body, using reinforcement learning. In practice, this creates something close to an operational ecosystem of robotic workers who are all connected. And as these machines enter the factories, my friends, another challenge starts to be tackled. It's about teaching robots to learn in the virtual world. The idea, of course, is to make them work naturally here in our world. Let's see what NVIDIA's up to. The Japanese company Fanuc and the American company NVIDIA announced an integrated system where robots are trained in virtual environments and start to behave almost the same way when they are transferred to real factories. And maybe this seems like just a technical detail when I'm telling you, until you realize the real impact and what this means for global automation. Training and validating industrial robots today is often very expensive and time-consuming. Companies need to physically test machines, adjust parameters in the real environment, deal with unexpected mechanical errors, and repeat validation cycles countless times. The new system tries to eliminate much of that. The integration combines NVIDIA Isaac Sim with Fanuc's industrial RoboGid software. The idea is to create extremely accurate digital twins in these factories. In practice, the virtual robot learns in a digital world. And the most interesting detail seems to be the growing focus on tasks that were previously considered too human for efficient automation. Fanuc itself recently demonstrated robots learning to fold t-shirts using imitation learning. The human operator performs the movement initially, while the robots are observing everything, and then they learn the behavior. And it's right here that we start to realize that this technology is starting to seem important beyond just factories as well. Because the moment robots are able to learn in virtual environments that are highly realistic, training no longer depends only on our physical world. And this drastically accelerates the evolution of machines, including humanoid machines, okay? Which are now entering the agricultural sector as well. Let's see. In April, they caught attention by running a half marathon in Beijing. It looked like an impressive demonstration of balance, locomotion, and robotic coordination. But just a few weeks later, China surprised even more. They decided to take these humanoid robots to a much more challenging environment than a track prepared for public display. They took these humanoid machines to the field. In China's Fujian province, G1 humanoid robots were deployed to take part in an extremely delicate and traditional Chinese process: the artisanal production of tea. And look, picking, transporting, pressing, and roasting tea leaves requires something that robots have historically always had trouble reproducing: fine adaptation to the real physical world. The humanoids went through just 1 week of training before they started working alongside human workers in real agricultural tasks. The goal wasn't only to show the robots walking around, it was to test whether artificial intelligence embedded in mechanical bodies can really start to replace specialized manual labor outside of controlled industrial environments. And perhaps the most important moment of the experiment happened precisely during the roasting stage. Traditionally, human masters, artisans, control the temperature, texture, and the tea's ideal roast point. Almost intuitively, using the experience accumulated by G1, since the robot G1 tried to reproduce this by using real-time thermal monitoring combined with advanced computer vision. In practice, the robot observed invisible heat patterns while it continuously adjusted the process. And the test wasn't perfect. There were mistakes. The engineers themselves acknowledged that the robotic hands still faced difficulties with extremely delicate tasks. At several moments, G1's fingers applied excessive pressure and ended up damaging some leaves during handling. According to those responsible for the project, The robot's movements were constantly monitored using motion capture systems and cloud-based learning. Each failure generated new data to immediately optimize the control algorithms of the biomechanical hands. In other words, the error of a single robot instantly feeds the learning of all other connected systems, and this creates an acceleration in learning. A human artisan takes decades to refine delicate movements, but a network of robots can share improvements globally in a matter of hours. This is a fact, okay? The shortage of humans for certain jobs is real. Many young people aren't interested in physically demanding agricultural and artisanal jobs. So, many companies turn to robots.
Muitas empresas, robôs humanoides,
For young people uninterested in farming or crafts, it's an economic necessity. And deep down, my friends, this whole revolution depends on something extremely strategic: the chips capable of powering the artificial intelligence behind these machines. Let's check it out. This one's interesting too, huh? During the high-level meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing, the US government approved licenses so that Chinese companies could buy advanced artificial intelligence chips directly from NVIDIA. At first glance, it seems like just a business deal, but maybe this reveals something much bigger about the current technological moment. Over the past few years, semiconductors have become the strategic equivalent of oil. Whoever controls the most advanced chips controls AI training, military infrastructure, scientific research, and economic power. And at the center of this dispute is the all-powerful NVIDIA. The H200 chips approved for export are among the most powerful AI processors currently available. Chinese companies like Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance, and GD.com have been authorized to acquire them under strict rules imposed by the United States. But there's an important detail in all of this. While Washington is partially allowing these sales, the United States is still trying to limit China's technological advancement in areas considered strategic, especially in artificial intelligence and semiconductors. In other words, the relationship seems less and less like a traditional economic partnership, and more like a delicate balance between cooperation and technological containment. Because deep down, both countries know that the race for artificial intelligence is no longer just about technology. It has become a contest for future sovereignty. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and make sure you're subscribed. The platform might unsubscribe you, so double check. Don't space out like people used to say, "Wow, I must be getting old." Click on one of the 2 suggestions to join me for another episode. Thanks for staying with me, and bye-bye. I've talked so much today my throat is sore. Bye-bye.